Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you've all been enjoying the Sun Conference thus far. So again, we're sad that we couldn't see you all in person in Missoula, but hopefully we will get to do that next year, and it will feel that much better for it, for the wait. And so in the meantime, we're excited that we're able to gather you all here and then have a few other people from your agencies be able to join who otherwise might not have been able to travel. And so before we get started, I wanted to let everyone know that this session is sponsored by Routematch by Uber. And so before we get started, there is a quick word that they would like to share. And I forgot to turn on sound, so 1 minute. Okay, this session is brought to you by Routematch by Uber, and they have a quick word to share with you. All right. So thank you, Routematch, and a preemptive thank you to all of our speakers that we have this afternoon. And so today we're going to talk about the technology that's available to us for our for rethinking our transit systems and the service that we deliver, and some of the experiences that some systems have had around the country and at varying levels. And so we have, before we get started, there's a couple of Zoom logistics. First, this is a meeting format instead of webinar format, so feel free to send in a chat question or comment through the chat box. Will Reckley, also from CTAA, he and I will keep an eye on the chat box just to know when to jump into everyone's presentation or when to ask questions. And we'll keep an eye on that for the end of the session as well. Everyone is muted upon entry, so this way it cuts down on background noise, but if we need you to elaborate on anything or use your microphone, we'll let you know, and then we'll ask you to unmute, and then I have the power to mute everyone if need be, so beware. And other than that, this is being recorded, so if you drop out and have to come back, or if you're floating around different breakouts, then you'll be able to come back to CTA's Sun website to watch this again later. And so with that, we have 3 speakers. We have Sarah Holtquist from Denton County Transportation Authority in Texas. We have Lou May from Bloomington Transit in Bloomington, Indiana, and Michael Witten from Manchester Transit Authority in Manchester, New Hampshire. So they're all doing great work, and therefore I will let them speak and be with you shortly. So I will unshare my screen so that Sarah, you can take over.
I'm going to share my screen.
All right.
There we go. Okay, so I'm with the Denton County Transportation Authority. We are in the North Texas area, just north of Dallas-Fort Worth. We're a very booming area. Lots of people have been moving into the region for years, and we expect that to continue. In fact, our population will probably double by 2050 is what we project. So we have to look at a lot of different ways to meet the demands of all this new population. So in doing so, we're really seeking out how to improve livability, mobility, and also sustainability within the community, improve air quality within the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And we work with a lot of different stakeholders around the region. We have 3 member cities, but then also work with additional counties for mobility needs. But today I want to talk about our microtransit service. And to start, I'll start with how we began. We had a underperforming route in our Louisville area. And so in 2019, we replaced that with microtransit. It's a great area to try out microtransit. It's very employer dense. And then it also connects to one of our train stations. So people can come in through the train and hail a ride and get to their employers. So what we found from that are a lot of different benefits. It's very passenger centric, it's very friendly, it attracts riders that would not normally have ridden before, or they would have had to sit and wait for the route to come by. Instead, they can hop on the app and just call for a ride. It comes generally within just a few minutes. Our max wait time is 20 minutes. But I use the service myself because our administrative office is in this zone that we've set up, but my office is further north. So I ride the train down right before I get to the station. I hop on the app, ask for my ride, and it's almost always waiting for me right there. If I do have to wait, it is just a few minutes. So it's very convenient, and I personally really love it. It also has the ability for, if people come off the train and they have not booked a ride, our operators are able to add them in and pool it with the riders who have reserved in advance. So this has been shorter wait times, more convenience, and again, attracted a lot of new riders who wouldn't have ridden before. So we had success in this Lakeway zone that we set up that was employer dense, connected to our train station. So when COVID hit, we actually decided to utilize what we had learned from doing microtransit. So what we had was a big decrease after COVID in our evening ridership. So rather than have our big buses going around empty, we blended our fixed route with on-demand, and we're able to now, in the evening hours, as people come off the trains, they can use our on-demand service, use the app, and schedule their ride or do a walk-up rider and get to their final destination. So initially, we did this at 4 train stations. With ridership declines, we can turn those zones on and off. Right now, we have 2 active zones in our member cities that are able to accommodate rides, but as ridership goes up, we'll be able to turn the other 2 zones back on to accommodate that. And with it being software-based, we were actually able to put those new zones in and implement them within a week's time, which is pretty phenomenal. We're also able to respond to COVID by managing the number of riders. As we have county regulations come out and we're wanting to enforce social distancing, it's very easy just to go into the software, change the number of people allowed on the bus, and then the software takes it from there. And as they schedule and book their rides, they're given time frames that still keep the bus social distance. If there's ever an emergency or anything like that, we can also send notifications to the riders. And if there's any service changes, we can send notifications to the riders through that app. So it's a great way to manage the riders and also communicate with them. So also with our COVID response, when we had a lot of schedule changes and we were responding to ridership declines, as we were putting that messaging out, we also rolled out our white label app. So previously we had been using the software's app, and now we have a custom DCTA on-demand app. Our marketing team did an amazing job rolling out this information with the schedule changes and the new on-demand information. But the booking process stayed the same. So if they were on the old app, they still had the same booking process, but now we have it customized just to DCTA. And to help this transition, we also kept the old app active just in case anybody is still using it and haven't installed the new app yet. We're not losing any riders But again, with the notifications, I'm able to go into the old app, let them know there's a new one that can be downloaded. So those are some of the things we have done with on-demand and responding to COVID. We are looking at how we might expand on-demand. These changes we made with the evening zones, how they can benefit us, what we can learn from them, but also looking to just a lot of different technology options at this point. With that, I will pass it to Mike unless anybody has any questions.
All right. Thank you, Sarah. So I think what we'll do is I'll let Mike carry it on, and then as people have questions in the chat box, I might jump in, or or we'll wait. So someone JBLIO has raised their hand. So while we set Mike up, if you want to ask your question.
Yeah, just real quick. I just wanted to know how you were able to, were you able to get grant funding in order to do that, or you were just able to pivot off of what you currently had in order to provide that service? You were able to use your existing funding in order to provide that service without having to make changes?
We did, and we were able just to pivot off of the contract we already had set up with them and build those zones. Now, if we expand further, we'll have to look at different options, but we were able to do that very quickly without changing the funding.
So you had existing partners, or partners that was giving you the microtransit service, or you did it yourself?
Yes, that was in our Lakeway zone. So
Okay.
in 2019 is when we started the microtransit in the business park for, to pilot it and decide if we liked it. We did. We kept it permanent. And so that's the one that connects to the train, and it's used pretty heavily. And as I said earlier, attracted a lot of new riders. But after COVID, we were able to take, what we learned, and we were very familiar with the software, and then put in those evening zones very quickly.
Okay. I'm hoping we'll get contact information. I'll be reaching out to you on how you were able to do that with using your existing funding.
Absolutely.
Create partnerships. Awesome. Thank you.
And so that's a good point. I'll have a slide with everyone's contact information at the end of this, so you'll be able to write that down. All right. Thank you, Sarah. And so next up, we have Michael Witten from Manchester, and I have a map for you. So take it away and let me know if you would like me to navigate.
Yeah, if you just want to drag the map all the way down, we need the north section. So sorry, go the other way. Yep, there we go. Perfect. All right. So things were a little different here in Manchester. We had kind of explored the idea of microtransit, but we had not implemented anything ahead of this year. I actually went to the SWATA conference, even though we're in New Hampshire and not really all that close to SWATA's region at all, but it was being hosted in Shreveport, and they're doing some really innovative things down there. So we were there in February and came home with these ideas of, all right, where we could, set this up, a year or two out. And then a month later, COVID hit the Northeast, and all of a sudden plans changed. So we had just partnered with Routematch last fall after almost 4 years, I would say, of discussions. So the initial discussion with Daisy Wall happened actually in Denver at Sun. And it sounded great. It was something that we had wanted. We had been frustrated with a few different scheduling software providers in the past. And one of the problems we had run into is, doing everything through the FTA procurements and low bids and high value. And we were just struggling getting what we wanted for a price that made sense for us. So we've been working with the city for the last 4 years, and we were actually able to procure both RouteShout and Amble from Routematch without a single dollar from FTA. So it's entirely local match. And while that made it take longer to procure it, what was critical was it allowed us to customize exactly what we needed. We didn't have to worry about all of the FTA hoops to kind of jump through. So if it's something that you have the time and ability to do, I highly recommend it. I mean, it was really, really nice to be able to just find what was the right fit for us and then work within that budget and just know that we were going to be okay. So then you fast forward to this April, and we ended up suspending all of our fixed route service as a response to COVID. We did keep demand response running for essential trips. And I really want to give kudos both to the team at Routematch, but also here in-house to our assistant director, Ryan Redald-Smith. He and the Routematch team, the way they were able to just totally accelerate the plan was really impressive to see. We went from initially just doing essential demand response trips, maybe a couple dozen a day, to within 2 weeks, we had it all the way up so that you could schedule online, you could call here, we were doing same day trips, really moving it from that demand response to a microtransit. We were connecting them in kind of with an existing network. So for April and May, really just kind of traditional demand response, but everywhere in the city. And the reason I have this map up, you can see this is the northern sections of Manchester, and we have two of our transit deserts here. So Route 11 and Route 5 are the only two buses that travel in the north part of the city. And you can see this river, and it's a little deceptive here. That is a pretty big dividing factor geographically for the city. We really have an east side and a west side, and they sometimes feel like two different communities, and each has one route, and then everything around it has nothing. So that 3/4 mile barrier, that paratransit or 3/4 mile corridor, doesn't cover a lot of people. And 75% of people that don't have transit access, so they live more than a mile from a bus stop, are in the north part of the city. The rest of the city has pretty good coverage. So all of a sudden, we were able to accommodate these folks through demand response. Then when we brought the fixed route service back, we didn't want to lose the access and the relationship we had created with these residents. So we kept it. And we kept it as a microtransit where they're still able to book in, but rather than demand response where they're modally being transported all the way to their origin, from their origin to their destination, we're connecting them with whatever the closest transit hub or fixed route service it is that fits for the rest of their trip. So maybe the microtransit is just taking them that first 1.5 miles and then connecting them with the fixed route that'll take them the rest of the way to the mall or to an employment center or to the university. So we are a good 18 months ahead of schedule from where we thought we would be with the microtransit piece, but it has been phenomenal. I cannot say how impressed we were with the ease of launching it. And I think one of the things that helped us was that with COVID, everybody was getting used to something new. You know, protocols were changing, even the way you grocery shopped, everything was different. So in normal circumstances, I think this would have been harder because people are generally somewhat resistant to change. They don't really want to see things move away from what they're comfortable with, but everyone's comfort zone was shattered. So they were very receptive to this. And this was a lot better than no bus service. I mean, that was the alternative. So this was a way to keep that connection there. And it was recognized, you know, by the city, by the state, and it will hopefully be here continuously. And we're looking at doing one on the west side in kind of the southwest corner this coming July, building on the success that we started here. So we don't have, you know, the formal plans. This was not how we envisioned this kicking off, but it's been a great success, and kudos to the team both here but also at Routematch for working together and launching that so fast given all of the circumstances everyone was facing.
All right. Thank you, Michael. So it's great to see that you know, you don't waste a good crisis and make stuff happen. So with that, we have one more speaker, which is Lou May from Bloomington, Indiana. And so Lou, feel free to take it away. And then after that, we'll open it up for questions and answers.
All right, thank you. Good afternoon. Appreciate the opportunity. Thanks for having me, Andrew, as part of the panel discussion today. I want to tell everyone a little bit about our interest here in Bloomington regarding micro transit service. I will tell you right at the outset here, we have not implemented anything yet, but we do have a strong interest along two different tracks for using microtransit. And one of those tracks is fairly new. It's related to the pandemic, and it was something that we didn't expect or anticipate, but we're having in-house discussions about it now. First, let me give you a little background about Bloomington, Indiana here. We're a small urban area, about 80,000 in population, 50 miles south of Indianapolis. We are a college town. It's home to Indiana University, a Big Ten school. We have over 40,000 college students in a normal year. We'll see how the pandemic might affect that here in just a few weeks when students will be hopefully returning to town. And students make up more than half of the population here in Bloomington, and they're about 70% of our total ridership on our fixed route system here. We carry about 3.1 million fixed route riders on the system here, and we also have an ADA paratransit service where we carry about 38,000 riders. To give you some further background about our interest in microtransit, last year we completed an in-depth route optimization study where we were looking at a redesign of our fixed route system. And the reason for that redesign, the community had grown over the last decade or so. Many more students were here. Enrollment at the university had increased significantly over the last decade. There was new development that had occurred all over town, especially with new apartment complexes that were springing up everywhere, including our downtown area, many of them housing college students. And as a result of the growth in student enrollment and the growth in population over the years, we had realized that the performance and the reliability of our fixed route system was suffering. There was more traffic. It was more difficult for buses to stay on time. We run a traditional pulse system out of our downtown area, and that pulse system is overlaid with routes that serve the university campus. So we knew we needed to do and take a very close look at our fixed route system, improve the routes, in some cases shorten the routes to give them additional time so that they could be more reliable. And we have late night bus service. Service goes to almost midnight here on weekdays. And not surprisingly, our ridership and our productivity on weeknights goes down. The later we go into the evening, the lower our ridership is and the lower the productivity is. So we were running and are running traditional fixed route service going to almost midnight. And we're seeing ridership productivity in the range of 5 to 10 passengers an hour anytime after 8 or 9 o'clock in the evening. And so our interest was in microtransit to see if we could realize some better efficiency, some cost savings, and also take an innovative approach to providing mobility at night. And microtransit seemed to fit the bill for us. So we applied last year for one of the IMI grants through the Federal Transit Administration for a mobility on demand project using microtransit. We partnered with VIA, who's a global microtransit provider, and we were pursuing a grant of a few $100,000 to do a one-year demonstration with VIA on providing microtransit service on late weeknights on a number of our routes where the productivity was less than 10 passengers an hour. We were hopeful that being a small urban area that we might be one of the few small urbans that would be interested in this and might be able to score one of those IMI mobility on demand grants. We were also interested in the turnkey approach with microtransit, whereby we would partner with a firm such as VIA, who would do everything. They would bring in the vehicles, the drivers, the technology, the app, everything. Because being a small urban provider, we're 100 employees, relatively small staff, not a lot of technical expertise on the staff there. So again, we're looking towards a turnkey approach with an experienced firm that knew how to implement and develop a microtransit program in a community like ours. It took FTA several months, I think it was 8 or 9 months, to evaluate all the grant proposals, and we finally got the news earlier this year that we were not selected by FTA. Of course, we were disappointed in that, but it hasn't affected our interest in microtransit. We're still very much interested in it. And then the pandemic hit in March, and that changed things fairly dramatically for us. The university here, most if not all of their classes went to an online format rather than an in-person format. Dorms and residence halls were closed. Many students went home to finish the semester after spring break. And then we had to reduce our service. You know, there were very few students left on campus. It didn't make any economic sense for us to continue to provide high frequency service to the university where there was nobody there to use it. Basically, we typically run frequencies of 10 or 15 minutes on our fixed routes that serve the university there. Moreover, we found that we had very little demand for late weeknight service after 7 o'clock. So like a lot of transit systems, we greatly reduced our service levels. And, you know, we went to a rear door boarding format, a fare-free format, much like a lot of transit systems around the country did. And it occurred to us, you know, we saw transit systems around the state and around the country that were starting to get employees that were testing positively for COVID. And it occurred to us that there's a real danger here. If some of our drivers or our maintenance staff come down with this and it very contagious disease and it goes through our workforce, you know, we may be caught in a dilemma where we don't have the drivers or the employees to provide service. And, you know, how would mobility be provided to the community there? So we opened up conversations with Uber and with Lyft about the possibility of a voucher program in the worst case scenario event where we had not enough drivers. If many people were home testing positive for the illness, or if they were quarantined due to exposure to another person who had it, how would we make pull-outs? How would we provide service? And we didn't want to leave the community in the lurch without any service alternatives available to them. So we've had some good discussions with Uber and with Lyft also. And we've reached a tentative agreement with Uber. We just have to iron out some final contract language, but I think we will hash that out very soon with them. And the parameters of the program that we're considering in using Uber in the event that we had to curtail service completely would be a voucher program whereby we send anyone who's interested links to a Uber voucher that they can use. Service would be provided Monday through Saturday from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Their trip origins and destinations would have to be within the city of Bloomington, which is our service area here. And the vouchers would be worth about $15 per trip. We would provide the first $15 subsidy on a trip. Everything over and above $15 would be paid for by the customer. And we would have a not to exceed limit of $250,000 in the first iteration of the contract with Uber. There was one drawback or one downside, as I mentioned, when we were pursuing a partnership with VIA as part of our IMI grant application, we wanted a turnkey approach whereby VIA would provide the vehicles, the employees, and everything. And that included accessible vehicles, accessible to people in mobility devices and wheelchairs. Uber, obviously, in most small communities like Bloomington, they don't provide accessible vehicles. And Uber wasn't interested in bringing accessible vehicles to Bloomington. So we have a little bit of a wrinkle in our potential partnership with Uber, we're going to have to provide accessible service and alternative service. Folks who are ambulatory would use Uber. Non-ambulatory folks in mobility devices will call us, and we'll have a dispatcher on duty and a handful of drivers using our paratransit vehicles that would provide the trips for people with disabilities in mobility devices. So that was just something that we had to overcome. That we didn't like that element of it being a small agency, but it sort of goes with the territory. If we're going to provide an alternative service, we were going to have to provide that alternative for people with disabilities there. Now, incidentally, we've been very fortunate here. We've had no employees test positive for COVID until we got to mid-July. In mid-July, we had our first maintenance staffer that tested positive for COVID. And then August 1st, just in the last week, we've had our first driver test positive for COVID as well. So it's timely that we're close to concluding our discussions with Uber and close to having an alternative program in place. But back to our plans to revise our routes and overhaul and redesign our service. We're still very interested in microtransit for that reason. We have delayed the implementation of our overhaul and service changes. We went through a lengthy public comment process, public hearing process back in the fall of last year. We were very close to getting our board's approval to move ahead with implementation of all the service changes in August of this year, coinciding with the return of students to town. But of course, the pandemic hit and we've postponed implementation of our service changes until January at the earliest. But our discussions with Uber have made us feel more comfortable in this different service delivery concept, whereby we might in the future consider using an existing service provider such as Uber and Lyft, who already have a well-entrenched service in our community. And perhaps that might make more sense to use rather than to bring a turnkey provider in, like whoever it might be, whereby you're going to have a much costlier service because they have to provide the capital portion of it. They have to employ drivers and other staff in order to deliver the service there. So again, it's interesting how our view of microtransit and the different service delivery options has changed given the pandemic that's hit here in Bloomington. So that's what I have. I'm glad to entertain any questions that anyone may have.
All right. Thank you very much, everyone. So, so as a reminder, everyone can send in questions that they have through the chat box. So to start off for Sarah from Mountain Line, I'm not sure which Mountain Line this is, if it's Missoula, Flagstaff, or Morgantown. But Sarah, which software did you guys go with in Denton County? And then how did you adjust for families or groups who board who are able to sit together?
We use Spare Labs as our software as a service. And we really haven't had a capacity issue yet. We use the cutaway buses that 12 riders can ride. It is, the main zone we have is more towards commuters. So when pre-COVID, if we were finding that we were having a lot of capacity issues, we just brought in a second bus. So, and right now I'm tracking that very closely. I actually look at it every single day. I have great analytics from Spare, but I still look at it very granularly because I want to see, do we need to bring that back? In the morning commutes, I'm finding a lot of people coming, but it's still less than 7 people at a time at the max right now. Which is about the max you would want to do on one of those buses with social distancing. But we haven't had issues with families coming on. If worst case scenario, their ride would go into the software and they would just get a longer wait time. But But the zone is built such that achieving a 20-minute wait time is very easy. In fact, our average wait time is usually 6 or 7 minutes if you don't have a bus right when you're coming off the train. And there's virtual stops all throughout the zone as well. So if that availability is, if you're trying to get on with a family of 4 and that availability wasn't there, you would get a wait time of when it would be there available.
Right, excellent. Regarding the Uber partnership for you, Lou, what terms or conditions did they make to your agency in order to establish potential partnership? And were there any quota discussions?
There are no quota discussions there. Basically, Uber would need to meet our service parameters that I mentioned. For example, trip origins and destinations would need to be within our service area here, which is the city boundaries, the days and weeks that we provide service and the hours there. Uber would give us links to that we would pass on to our customers. Customers could click on a link and a voucher would be sent to their Uber account. And then the next time that they went to book a trip on Uber, they would get that $15 subsidy on their trip.
All right. So follow up to that is, how did you come up with the $15 voucher number?
That's a good question. I guess to answer that, we talked with Uber about what their average fares are in the community. Of course, Uber is reluctant to provide a lot of information about that kind of thing. But we knew the size of our area. We're about 20 square miles. Most Uber and Lyft trips are in the range of $10 to $15. And so we set the ceiling at the higher end of the range. There could be the occasional odd trip that might be $16 or $17, but we were trying to keep the customers, the amount that the customer had to pay to about $1 or $2 at most there. And our fixed route fare is $1 here.
All right.
I
And
can say something to that as well. So we have, one of our member cities is on a system where we have Lyft throughout it, and then we do access for the paratransit. So, but what we did was we took the entire zone and said, if you started in this furthest point and we're taking a trip all the way to this other point, you know, what was the average cost of that? And so then we were able to set the subsidy at $13. Very rarely do I see it go over 13. It has to be like major traffic or something, but that generally covers. So it was just going from the furthest point to the other furthest point and determining that. We had originally started at 11 and saw some go over 11, and that's when we really looked at it carefully and determined that $13.
excellent. And so so actually, I guess for both of you, are Uber or Lyft providing you with origin and destination information on this service? I guess it might be a little early for you, Lou, but for you, Sarah, yeah.
I don't get great data on that. I wish I saw a little more of that. I see the miles and the cost, but even the dates I'd like to see a little more clarity on, but there's not, like we also use a taxi service in some of our areas, and they give me address to address, which helps me a lot to determine, are people going to medical trips, you know, identify the needs of our riders. So as far on the Lyft end, that's probably one area I'd like to see a little more information on.
Gotcha.
Just to add, illuminate, in our discussions with Uber, they're very protective of the privacy of their riders and their customers.
Yeah.
And you know, we're used to knowing who our customers are on paratransit, at least. You know the identity of each person, and Uber wasn't willing to reveal that information. And the more we thought about it, you know, we really didn't need to know the identity of the person. But Uber is also very protective of information. Some origin and destination information could be used to reveal the identity of someone. So they're very protective about that as well. And that's one of the challenges that you'll have when you're working with a shared ride mobility provider like Uber or Lyft.
Yeah, it's the same with Lyft. I don't see the rider or their destinations, which just the challenge for me on that one is I want to know, where the riders are going in terms of, do we need, to focus on riders who are trying to get to healthcare, dialysis, are they trying to go to grocery stores? Like, what are our riders trying to do so that we can provide better service for them? So that would be the only hang up on that. But it is very easy to use service. So I really like that. Our customers in that city who are utilizing it, they have a lot of flexibility. I mean, they have a Lyft come pick them up anywhere within the zone and take them where they want to go. And that's pretty convenient.
Mhm. So Paige has another question. And so this is for Sarah and Mike about what fares you're charging for Spare for you, Sarah, and then Mike for your Routematch service. And then I will kind of hijack that question and add on my own of, especially for Sarah, we had chatted briefly about bike ped infrastructure and connecting to that. So with these programs, have you seen any like multimodality, any connections in anything like that? So both for, I guess for all three of you, but in particular, I'm thinking of Mike and Sarah, what you've done so far.
Well, first on the fares, it's the microtransit service is included with just our regular fare, which you can do half day or full day. And then people can get monthly passes or regional passes since we're so close to Dallas. So the microtransit is just included. That's a little bit easier on operators because a lot of these passengers come off the train where they've already purchased a fare for the train.
And then for us, our normal fare is $2, but we sell day passes. The microtransit area requires the day pass. So it is a premium price, but once you've paid that, then you have unlimited access to the whole service.
And so then that can get you onto the fixed route downtown from there.
Yep, that'll get you anything local. It'll also count on all of our intercity. So that can get you up to the Capitol, it can get you down to Nashua.
All right. And then Lou, have you, especially with a college campus and in the old days, the before times, people biking around on campus and whatnot, have you kind of targeted that at all?
Regarding microtransit, we have not. Of course, on our traditional fixed route buses, we have bike racks on buses, and we have bike lockers and bike racks at our downtown transit center. And Bloomington is a big bicycling community. But, Uber, I'm not familiar with Uber having bike racks or ability to use bikes or carry bikes as part of their service.
I also have not heard of that as of now. All right. And so, Sarah, it looks like you had something.
Oh, no, I was going to talk about bikes since we
excellent.
started.
Please do.
Yeah, I think that is a huge advantage of microtransit over TNCs is that you can still use bicycles. So as you have the buses, I will share, I have a couple slides I put together for bicycles. So we actually, as I said before, we're very concerned about sustainability, air quality, and mobility in our area. I want to promote that as best as possible. And also livability. I think, with the generations kind of moving into our area, they want to see other ways to get around than just cars or big buses. So bike and pedestrian is a great way to accommodate that. So we make our transportation very bike friendly. We accommodate bicycles on transit whenever possible, and passengers, they can utilize the bike racks on the front of our buses. And then our trains are equipped with hooks for bicycles. We have bike racks at all of our train stations. And we also, our marketing department does a fantastic job of promoting biking resources and participating in any, community events related to bicycles. We also have, which I just love about our agency, is our rail trail, which was just finished a few months ago. It is 19-mile trail that is paved and runs alongside our whole rail. So commuters can, access it. They can ride their bike, ride down the trail and get to the station. There's a bike rack where they can take their bike on the train. It is also just a great source of recreation for the area. I live nearby it, and I like to take the kids out there and just use the trail. It's beautiful and very well kept. It's, and then sometimes for fun, I hop on the train with them and let them ride that too. So it's a great asset. And you can see on the left a map where it starts in Denton and it goes all the way down to the city of Louisville. So we also, make sure that it has amenities. It's got rest areas and trash cans along it, pretty landscaping, some benches. And it is, going through an urban area. So there is a lot of crossing areas. Some of them are busy roads, but we put in a special fencing for the safety. We do get a lot of bikers, but this requires them to get off and to go across. And then we also plan on installing some reflective surfaces to the fencing to help with visibility. But you can see in that photo above how it's just going right alongside our A train. So, and he said before he would share contact information, but I also put it here because I wanted to share those websites for the rail trail that I just talked about. And then also, I think that our agency, just to brag a little bit, does a really good job sharing the bike information, and they've put together a just wonderful resource page. So I listed that there as well if you want to see, the example of how we communicate to the public for biking and transit.
Thank you,
I'm happy to answer any questions about that.
So I will always be happy to talk about bikes. And
yeah, me too. I get excited about
integrating them more with the bus routes and whatnot, and especially microtransit as we go forward. And then Michael, I wasn't sure if I saw you about to speak.
Yeah, I think we're at the other end of that. New Hampshire has been a difficult state to do a lot of biking in. So Manchester is the largest city in our state, and our first painted bike lanes went on the road in 2018. So we are at the other end of that spectrum. And I think it's important to consider bikes. It wasn't something when we first launched this spring even crossed our minds. So we were using Entervans out there. And thankfully, we kind of had the epiphany before we had the first passenger that made the request for a ride and then was surprised when a van showed up. So we do have cutaways that have the bike racks, and it's something we've now integrated into the requests for the ride. But that's something I think can easily be overlooked if you're a smaller system and you don't handle a lot of bicycles normally.
Indeed. The platforms that you use, do they sorry, I got distracted by the chat, but do they allow for sort of trip planning across just like multimodal trip planning? So bike to here and then take a van or anything like that?
So ours does not. So we're midway through the implementation. Amble is here. The paratransit scheduling is there. We've kind of used that to do this precursor to microtransit. Route Shout is the fixed route component of that. That is in the process of being implemented right now. So once that goes live, those two will start working together. I know Routematch is very interested in that kind of shared ride ecosystem where it doesn't matter whether it's public transit, TNCs, multimodal. So as a customer there, I'm hoping that that's the direction we'll continue moving in. It's kind of my assumption, but we're pretty early on right now. So we'll see where it goes.
Excellent, thank you. So I was going back through the chat, and so going back to the voucher programs that you guys have for the TNCs, is how does the $15 voucher number, or Sarah 13 in your case, how does that compare to the subsidy per passenger for traditional transit services?
On Bloomington, our subsidy per fixed route rider is about $2.50. So obviously, the Uber voucher is going to be much more than what we're currently doing. But again, we're trying to provide service in a worst case scenario rather than leave the community with nothing.
And I don't know the exact number for fixed route subsidy, but I would say, as expensive as it is to run the buses, I think the overall cost with Lyft, and if you do it in the right areas, which this area seems to be working very well, the overall monthly cost isn't very high for Lyft.
Gotcha. All right, thank you guys. And then do those trips count towards your NTD data reporting?
I know I turn it in I'm not sure because it doesn't give I know with our NTD, our analyst that does it, she is taking all the information I can get from Lyft, but I don't get as much as I would like as far as NTD reporting from them. I will say with the software company we use for microtransit, they built that reporting for us so that we could continue to do that. So yeah, as far as microtransit, I would recommend putting that into your scope of work that you specifically want the NTD reporting.
Yeah, I can't give a definitive answer here as we haven't implemented microtransit service yet, but given the subsidies involved, I would think, this would count as your operating statistics in your NTD annual report.
Good to know. So I feel it's uncharted waters for a lot of people. And so a question from Will at CTAA. Has anyone found investment in traditional technology like bikes or trails have made people more willing to use tech services that help them take transit? So have walking on the trail opened people's eyes to taking transit options?
I think that's something we're trying to make happen. Like we would love to get to a point where you have a multimodal situation where you can choose the different ways, and then that tech encourage people to use bikes more. So that's definitely, a path we're going down, to just have as many tools as we can in the mobility toolbox. And our rail trail, I think, is a great way to get to that, with it coming, running alongside our stations. And then I would say microtransit service is that software that we use. There's an option where you can choose different, if you're booking a ride, when you set yourself up as a rider, you can choose, if you have a wheelchair, a bike, all those things to adjust for load times.
We've seen the benefit not so much in direct ridership, but in growing the number of community stakeholders. So New Hampshire was a state where there was traditionally no operating assistance. So all the local match is the responsibility of the city or town where you're running service. So there had been this history of, because of the funding silos, if you were a bike advocate or transit advocate, we were all kind of competing against each other. This fostered a different way of thinking in the state. So we're part of the Complete Streets Alliance. We're now working hand in hand with a lot of the bike ped groups. And through that unified effort, 2019 was the first year in over a decade where we got some operating assistance from the state. So we were able to get it back through the legislature. And I think it was that coordinated effort instead of just a bunch of individual voices talking. They may or may not ride the bus very frequently, but they now count us as an important part of the community that they're trying to build. And we do the same thing.
Right, thank you. So building off of that, a question from Chris. Has the use of microtransit made it easier to live car-free in Manchester, Denton, or Lou, in your case? Does it look like that might contribute to being able to do that going down the line with your redesign planning? So especially if you have kids or shopping with a lot of stuff to bring along with you.
I mean, the more you have of it, definitely. If like I said earlier, I used to drive, and it's a 20-mile trip from my office in the north to the admin office, and that is within our microtransit zone. And it's not a fun drive. It's down our interstate. It's very congested. So, but with this, it changed me. I use the train, and I love the convenience of just, it takes me 10 seconds to book my trip, and it's there. And like I said, if I wait, it's very minimal wait. And then it takes me to the curb in my office. And I mean, if I have a long day at that office, it'll come pick me up for lunch, drop me off at one of the restaurants in the zone, come pick me back up. And it's very feasible not to have a car if you have that accessibility.
And in Bloomington, I guess I would echo what Sarah said. The more mobility options that you give to people, the easier it is for them to live car-free. And that can take many different forms. It can be bike trails and bike lanes. It can be improved public transportation. It can be microtransit. It can be Uber and Lyft services. All of these things are good pedestrian facilities, are also, every transit rider is a pedestrian. So the more, the larger your menu of mobility options, the easier it is for people to live car-free. But it's always a challenge in this country. The car is king, and probably is going to be for the foreseeable future. But still, I think we're making great inroads towards being able to live car-free lives. And it's important for cities and transit agencies to provide as many options as possible.
I think it's an important step. I think candidly, we've got a ways to go before you could really be car-free here. I think it works if you don't need to leave Manchester. The problem in New Hampshire is you have regional travel needs, and I can count on my hands the number of transit systems in the entire state. So most residents in New Hampshire have zero access to transit.
Gotcha. So you had sort of varying levels of where you are along that path. So for looking real far into the future, especially with these microtransit pilots, has anyone thought about what, if they're even interested in, and what it might look like if you tried out autonomous vehicles in these microtransit zones? Just to throw that buzzword out there.
We are very interested. So if anyone's looking for a pilot location, you want winter weather conditions, give me a call. We're open to anything.
How hilly is it there?
It's pretty hilly. We've got that river right in the middle, so we can test a lot of different conditions. We have intercity service on interstates, so the whole gamut, whatever they're looking for, we'll test for them.
In Bloomington, we're interested in driverless vehicles, autonomous vehicles. We did a demonstration with one of the autonomous vehicle manufacturers about 3 years ago, and we ran a downtown shuttle for a day, just up and down the main drag in our downtown area there, just to demonstrate the concept and show people how it potentially could work. I think the technology is still a few years away, especially for larger transit vehicles, but I think it does have potential, and we're probably going to see it in the next 10 to 15 years, if not sooner.
Yeah, I agree. I think it has a lot of potential. I mean, for us as an agency, we're just exploring everything. We want to be as innovative as possible, make the best mobility choices we can. So, as that technology improves, it's something we've definitely at least explored.
Good to know. So, with future iterations of NCAT, we'll come knocking. And then the question that I had, oh yes. So the next thing I was going to ask, since we're closing in on the end of the time, but we still have 15 minutes, is when it came to researching and talking to and working out agreements with these different tech vendors, is there anything that you really wish you had known, or something that really came out and surprised you through this process that would be worth sharing with everyone in this virtual room?
I think for us, I was very appreciative with, in our case, Routematch, how patient they were from a vendor standpoint. You know, as I had said earlier, we had the first discussions with Daisy 4 years ago. And at no point did I feel this kind of hard sale, you know, pressure to buy now. We had the chance to go out, visit different transit properties. I went out and visited Page out in Rogue Valley, Oregon from New Hampshire, drove all the way out there and back and hit 24 transit systems on the way. And that was one of the things that we were looking at was, all right, what are you using for technology? You know, trying to take advantage of being there, looking at multimodal stations and figuring out what was going to be the right thing for us. We're a pretty small system. I mean, we have 24 vehicles. So a $200,000 investment is a big deal here, especially, as I said, in a state that isn't going to give you any money at the state level. That's all local money that we had to raise here. And it took years to build that up. But by going slow, we got something that we knew was going to be the right fit for us. And it has worked great. We've had the support all along the way. And I think that it's been accepted in the community, and hopefully it's here for the long term. So I think the biggest pitfall that I've seen people run into is it's tech. So you think, I want to be on the cutting edge. I've got to do it now and roll it out next week. And you know, we were there. We did that. We were sold a bill of goods on it. It's going to be the next greatest thing. It's fabulous. And it was a disaster. So go slow and get it right. That's the most important part.
Hey, definitely when you're bringing in this new technology, you know, find a company that is willing to give you great training for your staff, especially your operators. This is for a lot of them, you know, we have some that hadn't even used a tablet. So this had to start from scratch. But our provider, even just did a refresher the other day, and we had a couple new drivers, but the ones going in just to go over those features. So, you know, just making sure that that training is offered, and then also looking in some of these proposals, is there additional cost for that training, or is it included in the service?
I would add something here. You know, I'm a baby boomer. I'm more old school in my way of thinking. I'm more traditional in my transit thinking as well. And it was, as I said, we've had an evolution of thought in terms of how do we deliver microtransit. Originally, we were quite adamant that we want a turnkey provider. And, you know, that would be the easiest approach for us to pull this off. And suddenly the pandemic hit, and that changed our thinking. We may not be able to get a, you know, a turnkey provider to come to a small urban area like Bloomington and do everything for you. So again, I would just encourage people to not be so tunnel vision in their approach to service delivery methods. You know, there's more than one way to accomplish what you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, and I'd add, it kind of goes without saying, but you're on the Zoom today, so we can assume you're pretty plugged in with CTAA, but you're paying dues. Take advantage of this membership in the association. You've got hundreds of systems across the country. There are so many demonstration projects that have already happened. There's no reason to build this from the ground up. You know, reach out to other folks. The resources and the partnerships we got through CTAA members made this so much easier. And let us avoid mistakes we otherwise, I know we would have made, because people brought things up that I hadn't thought of at all. And thankfully we didn't fall into those holes.
And to echo what Mark is saying about take advantage of resources through folks like CTA and others. And Andrew, you mentioned this at the outset. Here in Bloomington, we are the recipient of one of the NCAT Technical Assistance Awards from CTAA. We're very grateful for that. And CTAA is going to be providing consultants and experts in the areas of microtransit service, as well as the transition to electric buses here We have our first electric buses on order that will arrive sometime next year. And I expect that we're going to learn some new things, new ways of doing things as a result of this assistance that we get from CTA through the NCAT program.
Yes, so good plug there. Thank you, Lou. You know, what I do largely at CTA is work on NCAT, the National Center for Applied Transit Technology. And so our whole goal is to give you as much information as possible in various forms. So obviously, we can't provide in-depth TA to everyone as much as we would love to. But at the very least, we are doing white papers and webinars to give you a sense of what's going on. And Chris Zeilinger is working on a promising practices guide. So building off of everyone's points here is learning from what other people have done. And so you can both reach out to those systems and then also have a better understanding of what has happened and what's out there. So we're definitely trying to collect as much information as possible to share it out again. So let's see, I'm looking back at the chat box and there is another question for Bloomington. What is the marketing approach for the service that you're proposing now?
Well, admittedly, we're not very far along in that. I would presume we'll take a traditional approach with regard to marketing. When I say traditional, you know, I'm talking about use of the internet, of course, to get the word out to people. Mainly, we'll be trying to publicize the availability of the Uber vouchers to people. So publicizing a link where people can access those vouchers. And I'm sure we'll use resources such as our own agency website, social media, and probably other ways to get the word out. Probably traditional, but maybe a few non-traditional approaches as well.
So that actually made me think. But have you guys had to engage in any digital, virtual stakeholder engagement, public meetings, any input like that since the pandemic hit? And then has that helped you, or has that resulted in different types of feedback than the traditional public meeting did?
We haven't. We've had a public hearing. We were still able to do that. Of course, it rings then. Do that live here at the facility. But we've been accepting things through social media, through email for about 5 years now. So that's already kind of an accepted practice. And we get the majority of our public comment through online measures rather than letters or testimony. It's pretty rare for folks to come to the public hearing itself. So we rely on the social media to get a temperature check for whether or not this is the right solution.
We have, I know our last public meeting was virtual, but we also have an open system and we have social media and all that, but we also have what's called our Go request. It's a platform where they can, writers can go in, they can address concerns, complaints, compliments, anything that they want. And then we see that and it's delegated to the appropriate manager to contact that person. They can do that online. There's an app to do it. But then if they don't have the technology, they can call customer service and our agents will enter that in for them. And then in that platform, it stays open. And like when one is assigned to me, it stays open. I can make notes in it, internal notes. I can contact the customer. So it's just an awesome way to talk to your customers and get feedback and see if there's room for improvement, or sometimes we get really great compliments through that. So that's nice too.
In Bloomington, we did all of our public hearings on the service redesign, and public meetings were done before the pandemic hit. So they were all done in person, and we had a lengthy series of public meetings to get public comment through the traditional ways you do that. Since the pandemic has hit, the only thing that we are doing with the public virtually are our board meetings, and we have had some comments through our board meetings. I will be going to City Council next week to present my budget, and I anticipate we'll get quite a number of comments virtually as a result of that budget presentation.
Budgets always attract a lot of questions. And so a question from Will related to talking to City Hall is, have any of you guys had any trouble convincing decision makers that new tech is good? Or on the flip side, especially building off your point, Michael, of go slow and get it right, have you had any trouble convincing officials that you need to slow down and be a little bit more deliberate?
We haven't. I think one thing that was key to our success was keeping that dialogue open from the beginning. You know, when I first approached the mayor about this, we laid out, you know, a multi-year kind of phased approach to it, explained the reason that we wanted to try to do it with just local funds and the control that that would give us as a community over what we ended up procuring, and getting that buy-in from the policymakers and then from the employees too, letting our union know, okay, here's the technology we're looking at, here's how it will and won't impact your position. You know, it's not dissimilar with autonomous vehicles. Our union knows that we are very interested in that technology, but specifically not interested in it as a way of replacing the driver. You know, we would keep that employee on the vehicle, but have them change into a customer service, there to help the riders rather than there just to operate the vehicle.
And we still have our operators for our microtransit service. This is our buses. We just use the software. But I also saw a question, people who can't afford smartphones or language barriers, if they are always welcome to call our customer service department, and they will enter those trips into the software for microtransit. And then we also have, you know, in Texas, obviously a lot of Spanish speakers. And so we've got people who are bilingual to assist with that. And then they can book 8 days out. So if they want, they can call customer service and they can book their entire week.
Here being a college town, we're very progressive politically. And the issue was brought up early in our discussions about microtransit, about the folks who can't afford to have smartphones there. So as our thinking has evolved on this, and we've gotten away from the turnkey approach, we realize we're probably going to have to provide our own service for people in mobility devices. We're going to have a dispatcher on duty. And so the plan is people would be able to call in to a dispatcher to make a reservation if they don't have smartphone access, meaning the ability to book an Uber trip using a smartphone.
All right, excellent. So we have 5 minutes left, 3 minutes left. And so first, there is everyone's contact information on the screen here. So feel free to reach out to us all if you have any questions. I'm also putting in the chat box a link to our next tour, which is really exciting. So we're going through the virtual tour in St. Cloud, Minnesota. So everyone, of course, is welcome to go through there. It'll be really interesting to just get to visit somewhere, even though it is on the computer. I think it'll still be exciting. Other than that, do any of you three have any kind of closing words of encouragement or advice, pearls of wisdom to send everyone off into the great yonder with?
Don't be afraid. Just do it.
Yeah, I would say there are so many great options out there. And I mean, at very least, look to piloting or studying. You know, a lot of these companies that are growing and want to get their foot in the door are willing to do studies or, you know, give you really good proposals. So just explore what's out there, go to as many virtual things, talk to people. Certainly we've got our information up there. I'm happy to answer any questions about what we've done here in Texas.
But just add, be willing to think differently, be willing to take risk, and don't be afraid to ask for help.
Right. Those are great words to part on. So again, CTAA is here to help, as well as Sarah, Lou, and Michael. And so I will, leave this information up as well as that Zoom link for a couple of minutes. The tour will start at 4 p.m. So you guys can click on that. And as always, if you click in early, you'll just wait to be let in. And so thank you very much to all of our speakers today. It was great getting to have a conversation with you, and great to see so many people join us for Sun this year. I know there's a lot going on, and so we're glad that you were able to make time to join us today. And so, so thank you all. And once the room starts to clear out a little bit, then I'll close everything out. But we'll see you at 4 in St. Cloud, Minnesota.